Hello everyone, welcome to Cara's first webinar of 2026. Thank you all for taking the time to join today. We're really excited to be joined by Dr Erika Corradini, who's a teaching fellow at the University of Southampton. So I'm going to hand over to Erika in just a second to give us some really useful information on academic CV writing. But just before I do, just to go through a few housekeeping things for today. You won't be able to see each other. You should just be able to see myself, Erica, and Eleanor. So please feel free if you've got any questions throughout the webinar today, you should be able to use the Q&A function. If you use that function, then the questions won't be published for everyone. They'll just go to us for review. But just before I start, I'm going to post the PowerPoint that Erica will be using into the Q&A. So if anyone wants to download it to go through and make notes while Erica is speaking, then you should be able to use the link to do that. So I've just published if you go into the Q&A, you should be able to see the PowerPoint and download it from there. If anyone has any issues accessing that, then you can also use the Q&A function. And let me know, and I can send it to you in another way if you can't access it. But I think that's all from me, and I'll hand over to Erica now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jess, and hello everybody, and welcome to the academic CV writing. Thank you very much for the introduction, Jess. My name is Erika Corradini, and I work at the moment at the University of Southampton, where I have been an academic for about 15 years, or possibly more. My background is mostly in humanities, but I have been, again, through colleagues and friends at the university, I have also been collaborating quite closely with a lot of people working in the sciences. So I hope that what I'm going to be talking about today will be of use to all of you in one way or another, and no matter what your disciplinary background is. More recently, or for the past 10 years, really, I have been an education developer and an academic developer. So some of the things that I'll be talking about today are based on that experience that I have accumulated over the past 10 years working with, again, academics from all walks of life in a sort of a research-intensive university in the UK. So I think what is useful to say here is that some of the things that I will say in the presentation will be pretty obvious, but hopefully if you already know them, these may serve as a reminder of some of the things and the elements that may be useful, are still common, still very much in use in academic CV writing, and can be used by you sort of to put together an academic CV. So I'll talk for quite a bit, I think. Well, not quite a bit, hopefully it won't be too long, but I'll talk for a bit. And then I will hand over to you to ask me any questions that you may have. And Jess and Eleanor will moderate the questions as well. So they're here to help. And hopefully, again, you'll be supported throughout the time that is spent together. I also have a quick activity at the end, which you can do sort of individually. And again, that hopefully will give you an opportunity to do a little bit of reflection and to ask me even more questions if you have them. So again, you can follow on the the slides on the on the screen. I will talk to them, but also you can download the PowerPoint, and that I think might be useful, especially towards the end, if you want to go back to some of the slides and some of the things that we'll talk about. So this session introduces key ideas for writing an academic CV. And again, I cannot stress enough that some of the things that I will say are based on sort of a typical academic CV. So there are various versions, and obviously every version needs to be tailored to your own needs and to your own particular experience. But what I cannot stress enough is that we are going to be talking about an academic CV, which is different from other types of CV, like professional CV, etc. So this is academic one. So we will consider how to organize and present evidence of academic activity, of what is considered to be evidence, discuss strategies for tailoring your CV to different academic roles. So I'm assuming, again, I don't know if this is the case, and you will tell me when we get to the question point, that you have, like most academics in the UK, different roles. So these can vary from being a researcher to being a teacher to being a leader or an administrator, in the sense that, again, the academic life encompasses many different roles, and these have to come through in your CV. So an academic CV is a comprehensive record of your scholarly and professional life in a higher education institution, so at a university. It has to provide a detailed overview of your education, your research, your teaching, your publications, funding that you may have gotten, leadership, and overall kind of contribution to the academic community. So academic CV can be longer than professional CV, where you kind of go over the skills that you have accrued, and more detailed. However, more and more the academic CV that you have to hand in for job sort of applications have a set number of pages that I would again allow you to double check over and over again. But sort of typically sort of an academic CV has to demonstrate the depth and the breadth of your academic experience. So it has to be to go in quite some detail, but also it has to be quite broad. So the core information of an academic CV, so the information has got to be clear, so easy to find, and has to be logically organized. And we will talk about what sort of logically organized kind of means. Consistent, so the formatting, the dates, the referencing follow the same pattern or the same kind of, format kind of throughout. It has to be based on evidence, so all that you claim that you have done have to be supported by examples or outputs or measurable outcomes. It has to show the impact that you have had. And again, all evidence and impact tend to be scary words a little bit. So again, if you have any questions later on, we can go over these again. So the impact is about your achievements, who you have influenced, what the outcomes of your activity have been, or what your contribution, generally speaking. It has to be relevant, so there may be things that you have done which are not necessarily relevant to the job, the academic job that you are interested in. So again, some of the information needs to be kind of presented in a way that is tailored to the role or the opportunity that you are seeking or applying for. And it has to be professional, so it has to have like a clean layout, it has to be proofread, and again, the fact that kind of the consistency and the layout kind of bespeak or kind of support your professional persona, so your professionalism. If we go. So a typical academic CV includes the following section. So contact details, again, it seems to be a very silly thing to say, but I know that sometimes people sort of kind of underestimate this bit. So in the contact details, you can have obviously things like, your LinkedIn account if you have one, or handle if you have one. Your phone number, again, check that all the details that you provide in the contact details are correct, and people can actually, reach you through the contact details. It seems silly, but when you are there writing it, it's the section that most people kind of dismiss a little bit because it's so obvious. And sometimes, again, it has happened to me many times that the contact details provided were not correct. So again, I cannot stress that enough. And then the first kind of very prominent section is that of your academic and professional appointments. So the academic and professional appointments are the appointments, so jobs that you have done in an academic context. And again, these also have to be relevant to the opportunity that you are interested in. And then also in terms of prominence, the publications kind of come right after. And these publications often sort of mirror your academic appointments. For example, if you were appointed postdoc or a researcher in a certain area, you might want sort of anything that you have published in that area to appear sort of quite high up and quite prominently just after your academic appointments. And then obviously also in terms of research, you can list the grants and the funding that you may have received. This can be preceded by a small, kind of a very brief couple of sentences of a research summary. So again, what research are you're doing kind of specifically, but again, this is not a paragraph, it's more like a kind of a sentence explaining the area in which you research. And then you can have a section about a teaching activity where you list again any teaching that you have done in an academic context, any leadership or admin. So for example, leadership is if you've had like roles within the academia where you have developed your leadership. I put service in bracket because we don't call it service necessarily in the UK, but most kind of again, sort of English speaking, North American, especially university call it service. So it's where you have supported through leadership colleagues within your sector and your field. And again, we'll look at these in a moment. And admin as well. Admin could be kind of student recruitment, this sort of roles. And then you have esteem indicators if you've won any prizes or any awards that indicate that the work that you've done has been recognized. Membership and affiliations, again, within the areas, both research and teaching that you're active in, and any additional appointments. And again, this is a little bit controversial. I always put the education at the end. Now, there is a caveat to this because obviously I finished my PhD kind of a million years ago. So I just put it at the end. It's not the most prominent thing for me, for people to notice. Obviously, if you are fresh out of a PhD, you might want to put it at the top. So again, it's up to you to decide how you kind of organize these sections. Usually for research intensive universities, but again, this doesn't apply to everyone, I would put research first and teaching second. But if you are very active and the bulk of your activity is in teaching at university level, again, you swap them around. Obviously, the most prominent section has got to be the section that is most relevant to the job or opportunity you kind of are looking for. Yeah, if we go on one slide, the next slide. Yes, so I wanted to start from publications just to give you an idea. Now, with publication, if you are active in research, you all know more or less the kind of publications that are relevant for a CV section. Again, you start from books that you may have published, book chapters, peer-reviewed journal articles, publications about teaching, reports, policy pieces, opinion pieces as well, like blogs, for example, especially those that are outlining your impact in certain areas. So this is more or less the order of appearance for publications. Now, having said that, you may not have a book, or you may have other publications which have through which you can show impact. In which case, I would put them first. And again, I put it at the end of the slide. So your key publications. Those that demonstrate significant impact have got to be towards the top so that people notice them immediately. So publication. So when I talk about significant impact, I mean you can, for example, indicate the impact factor of a publication, especially for the people working in science, but also equally, not everybody will have very high impact factor, especially if you are at the beginning of your career. So you can also use testimonials. So the testimonials are particularly important for people who have publications in the area of teaching, where, again, these could be different types of publications. So you could have, I don't know, someone saying, I used that particular publication to, I don't know, to teach other people to do something, or I used that particular publication in my area and that was very impactful because. So that is a testimonial that you obviously can use to show that your publication was impactful. And again, I mean, we can go back to this. You can ask me other questions. If we move on, so after publication, again, you may have grants and funding. So where you have to kind of highlight all of the things that you see on the slide, the funder and the scheme, the project title, the amount awarded. Your role is very important. So whether you were principal investigator or PI or co-investigator, if you're co-I or collaborator, brief note on the outcomes. And again, this section is very important because it evidences your ability to attract funding, which is, again, increasingly important in UK universities, in all universities. But also, obviously, this will give substance or ground, in many ways, some of the publications that you may have listed above. So that's important that these two kind of sections are kind of linked to one another. If we go on, so for those of you who are very active in sort of as teachers, so for example, if you were or are still kind of lecturers, but you don't do much research because you are working in a teaching intensive universities, like there are many in many countries. So this is an area that I would not dismiss at all. Again, because the research has been so prominent in UK universities for so long, there is always a tendency to disregard a little bit the teaching activity. So I would encourage you not to do that. So teaching activity is very important, especially if you can link it to some aspects of your research. So just to show that you have like a coherent area that you have taken time to develop. So your teaching profile should outline the the modules that you have taught and the levels at which you have taught. And again, level 4 in the UK is the first year undergraduate. Before that, you have foundations. So foundations, level 4, level 5, level 6, level 7 is the master's level and PhD level. So again, whatever teaching you do, indicate at what level you're doing it. If you have experience of designing the curriculum, so not just that of delivering teaching, but also designing teaching, obviously you may want to say that. If you have innovated in teaching or in pedagogy, again, that's another area where you can say what you have done on your CV. For those of you who supervise master students, especially, or PhD students, obviously this is something that you need to kind of, say in your CV. Again, there might be people, again, I have many colleagues who have never taught one single session in their life, but they have supervised a high number of PhD students in their career. Obviously, this is a section where you want to actually indicate, how many students you've supervised. You might actually indicate also the area, sort of, what did you supervise them in? So the PhD thesis, master thesis with the title of the thesis, and you have to ask them permission to do that as well. So teaching activity within academia is becoming a lot more important. So if you have published anything or are thinking about developing your teaching activity, obviously sharing your best practice through publications, scholarly publication, is also something that you may want to keep an eye on and consider doing going forward. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to do everything at the same time. But again, possibly my key message here is do not disregard it, because it's important. And then you have leadership. So basically, you have to demonstrate, or you can demonstrate, that you are developing your leadership or have led within any of the sort of academic areas in which you are active. So for example, if you are module lead or have been in the past a module lead or a program lead, that's again, that's important information. If you sit on certain committees, or if you have quality assurance roles, these would be for teaching mostly. If you are an external examiner, again, if you don't know what an external examiner is, we can do sort of another section, another session, sorry, about this. But these are all kind of roles that show that you are recognized within the sector in which you work, within the field that you work. For those of you very active in research, you might be asked to do peer review or to have editorial responsibility, like to be an editor for a journal. If you are not yet an editor for a journal, perhaps this is an area that you may want to develop going forward. And any contribution to any professional bodies. Again, some of you will work in areas like, for example, I'm thinking medicine and related disciplines, or nursing, midwifery. These are all areas which are regulated by professional bodies. So interacting with professional bodies is very important for your professional activity. And obviously, if you have already done that, you might want to put it in your CV. If not, it's an area that you can think about developing. Yeah, so going forward, one. So, and then any esteem and indicators of esteem help to demonstrate that your work has been recognized or is being recognized in your field. Now, when I get to this point, I never like this area, because I think that there are plenty of people, academics, who are doing a brilliant job without necessarily having been recognized or constantly being recognized. If that's your case, again, my advice is don't panic if you haven't got any indicator of esteem just yet. But obviously, it's an area where you can again, into which you can look and you can think about going forward. I wouldn't want you to think that you have to become greedy in terms of indicators of esteem, but it's definitely an area where you want to have a little bit of a strategy, let's put it that way. For example, if you are active in teaching, one relatively easy sort of recognition to obtain is the fellowship status, a sort of fellowship of HEA or senior fellowship of HEA, something that is recognized in the whole country and also beyond. So again, it's something that you can think about. You may have advisory or consultancy roles, like for example, that of being an external examiner. You can think about National Teaching Fellow. That's very, very difficult to obtain. So again, only when you become more established, perhaps within an institution, that can be helpful. And again, please be aware of the fact that you don't have to do everything immediately. I'm just giving you like a variety, like a range of opportunities that you can think about as you progress in your career. So in that sense, I think being greedy is not the way to go about it. It's more like planning what can be useful for you and going sort of about it kind of fairly strategically. That would be my advice. Yeah, if we move on to one. All of these sections that I have kind of emphasized, or that I did talk to, should be tailored to the specific roles that you either have had, or would like to have. Now, in the UK, the academic positions are different. So most people know the traditional kind of lecturing role, that of being a lecturer. And in that role, you still have roughly 40% of your time is spent doing research, 40% of your time is spent doing teaching, and 20% of your time is spent doing admin, leadership, management. It depends what level you are. However, all the world of academia is different, and these roles vary depending on the institution where you want to work or end up working. So these can be very research-focused roles, especially if you get like a postdoc position, for example. But there are also sort of roles that are research only, and these are the most exciting for most people, but they also imply bringing in a lot of research money, let's put it that way. But there are also, again, alongside research-focused role, there are also teaching-focused roles, so where people focus their activity on the sort of the teaching, sort of the more kind of educational activity. For example, my role, I've always been in teaching focused role, and you can progress up to professorial level in these roles. So again, it depends really what you're doing. And also leadership. These are roles. So leadership is part of research and teaching as well, but there are also kind of management and leadership roles within university. And obviously, whichever role you're interested in, that's the sort of, you have to give, when you write your CV, you have to give emphasis to the most relevant section to that role, so to the section that is most relevant to that specific role. So for example, if you want a research focused role, obviously your research has got to come quite high up in the CV. On the other hand, if you have a teaching focused role, your teaching activity has got to be quite prominent on your CV. Last couple of slides. So a few tips to enhance the effectiveness of your CV. So use active, precise language. Active language is sort of shows that you, as an individual, are doing, have done more likely in a CV certain activities. Um, Again, I would advise you in the UK, showing impact is very, very important. So if you can quantify your achievements where possible, that obviously can help you to boost your CV. So not just the activity, but also the outcome of that activity. So for example, if you won like a research grant or if you are part of a research group, you might want to highlight, for example, what the impact of that research is in a publication, for example, or perhaps in a different output that you may have. Keep your document updated regularly. Now, the fact of keeping your document updated regularly is very important, not only because you avoid kind of, most of us do write up their CV and then you look at it kind of 5 years from now when you want to change job or whatever. So if you keep your document updated regularly, you don't have to sort of get to the point where you said, oh, I haven't written my CV in 10 years. That's one benefit, but the most important benefit of keeping your document updated regularly is that you can be strategic about your activities. So you can decide what to do when you need it. And this is something that, for me, at least in my experience, has been really very valuable. So you can keep developing your profession, yourselves in the profession as you write your CV. So in other words, you don't kind of wake up in the morning and say, oh, what would be good to have? A national teaching fellowship. And then, you are none the wiser because obviously you have never thought about it before. So it's kind of keeping that regularity and that developmental approach to your CV that will kind of make a big difference. Also in the way, and you can also enjoy it doing it that way. You can seek feedback from colleagues or mentors. Mentors in particular, I know that Cara has got like a mentorship kind of sort of program. So again, mentors can be really, really crucial in helping you to actually decide what area of your CV needs to be developed and when. And again, a strong CV provides a coherent narrative of your academic development. Now, an academic career spans over a number of years, and you may be forced to actually move sideways or move into areas that you had never considered before. So there might be a point where some aspects or some elements of the work that you have done are no longer useful for your CV. So in that sense, I would encourage you to think what makes your CV coherent by, again, curating it. Curating it means sort of eliminating things that no longer serve a purpose, but also don't eliminate them too quickly if you can find a narrative around them that can be useful to your sort of academic profile or academic persona. I can give you an example from my experience when I did my PhD in a very, very narrow area, in an area that is not popular anymore. And I kept my publication on my CV for a very, very long time. At some point, I just thought to eliminate them, and I did because they no longer served a purpose. However, they are still there on my research profile, on my kind of website profile. And even if they are not particularly useful, I usually say, before doing all that I have done in recent year, I also did research in this area. and this has given me the skills that I have then used in doing, other research in a different area later on. So something along those lines where there isn't necessarily an immediate link, but some of the skills that you have learned in that particular area that no longer serves a purpose can be repurposed for something else that you have done in more recent times. Sorry, this was a bit confusing, but then again, I can explain more if you have any questions around that. And last slide. Again, this is just a way of kind of concluding. So academic CVs are comprehensive documents that reflect your scholarly identity and your academic identity. So they require a clear structured consistency, evidence. So remember these three words, so the structure, consistency, and evidence. You have to tailor it a little bit to show the relevance to different roles, and also mention the outcomes of your work as a way of giving it a bit of grounding. So effective academic CVs communicate who you are as an academic and where your work is heading. So basically, from the CV, your academic profile needs to kind of come out quite powerfully. And that's the end. I hope that that was okay, Jess and Eleanor. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Yeah, if anyone's got any questions, you should be able to, along the top of the screen, there should be a Q&A button, which if you can click on there, you'll be able to submit questions and we'll read them out as they come in. But yeah, time for questions now. If anyone wants to ask Erika anything, then now's the time.
I just wanted to say, so please feel free to ask anything, really. So if I talked about things that are too obvious or not obvious at all, again, feel free to sort of, any question is welcome. So don't be afraid to ask.
I've got a couple of questions come in. The first one is, what's the difference between a CV and a portfolio? And should we include a biography in the CV?
Academic CVs do not usually have a biography. So that's because they usually, so when you do an application where your academic CV is required, that application also contains other documents, like, for example, a covering letter, where you write up the narrative, and often you have to upload these documents to a website, and that web system already asks you all the kind of biographical details that the people at the other end, so the search committee, in other words, requires. So I wouldn't put the biography on an academic CV because that would be redundant, let's put it that way. So the difference between a portfolio and a CV is quite substantial. So a CV is a list of things that you have done, whereas a portfolio is a gathering of things that you have done. So it's a gathering of evidence. So in a portfolio, they may ask you to provide evidence of you delivering a lecture, for example. So you have to provide, for example, a video recording, the PowerPoint, a session plan. That's a portfolio. A research portfolio would be, again, providing, for example, an impact case study, a number of publication, and any other outputs that you may have come up with. So again, a portfolio can sometimes be a document of many pages, whereas a CV, I don't know, usually 4 pages of CV are about enough. I mean, there may be longer CVs, but usually 4 or 5 pages of CV is more than enough for an academic CV. typically. So I hope that that's clear.
Thank you. Another question, is there a preferred CV format like Europass?
That's a difficult question to answer because so generically speaking, as again, I'm assuming the question is fairly generic, I would say no. But again, if they want a specific format, I'm assuming that they will ask it. So essentially, if a specific format for CV is required, is because there is a need, again, for example, by the institution to kind of have the same formatting for everybody who sends in a CV. For example, every institution has got like a template for a CV. That people use internally. So if you are external, you wouldn't have that particular template. So again, in my opinion, the template is not that important, but sometimes you may be asked to use a template and to provide the information following that template. I hope that that answers is not, again, it depends on the situation, let's put it.
Thank you. Another question is saying that a lot of this person's experience is not in the formal academic sector, but more in a policy think tank. For example, I've experience in applying for and implementing grants, but not with an academic funding body. I've taught and supervised, but not in the academic environment. Could you advise me how I could make it relevant and interesting to my transition to UK academia?
Not every university, most universities, especially the research-intensive universities, have alongside the research pathway, they have enterprise pathways, which I think your experience seems to be coming under. Again, it depends very much on the role you're seeking to establish yourself in. So if it's the role of a researcher, it is your research that has to be really, really clear. So again, whether you want to consider if that's your first move or if you want to do a different move, it's up to you, obviously, but this is the bit that you need to kind of consider. So there might be other roles in academia that are, I would call them support roles in a research environment, so for researchers. So for example, some of the things that you said in your question make me think that you might want to look for a role as researcher developer, for example, or a support role in research. These roles are often academic and are needed because the researchers don't have the time to work within or to understand the policies, for example, to understand all the infrastructure of a research grant application. So in research intensive universities, there are units where there are people with the kind of experience that you have who support researchers or people who do research firsthand. So I would probably look into that first with an awareness that if you end up in that area, you can still work in academia, but you won't work in an environment where you do firsthand research. If you want to do firsthand research, you have to go back to your PhD work and again, seek opportunities where you can offer the skills that you learned doing your PhD. I hope that that's fairly clear. Again, I don't want to, to give you too much of a precise answer, because again, it depends very much what you want to do. But there are these two elements in academia where you do actually do research, but where you also support research, and the roles in supporting research are many, are varied, and some of them are even quite interesting. So
Thank you. Just to summarize a few similar questions about the length of CVs. So, for example, someone said, I've heard it could be 3 pages long. You mentioned it could be longer. What's the limit? Someone also asked, is there a range for the CV in terms of pages? And there was another one. Someone else also asked, when I add all my publications, it's hard to keep it even in 5 pages. Is this a negative thing?
um, it can be. So again, I would advise you to be a bit, perhaps a bit sensible about it. So if you want to publish, so for example, again, if you go online and you look you look up your favorite academic CV, this is something that we all do just to kind of share practice, not to copy anything. So there are people who publish like a PDF of their CV online in their own personal website, for example, or on LinkedIn. So in that kind of CV, you can put anything. Again, I would still advise you to be coherent and to show sort of your professional academic profile quite coherently. So in that sense, you can put all of the publication that you've ever done in your academic career. If it's for a job, I would keep it very very focused, I would say, and very sharp, because again, if you have 500 publication, again, I mean, there are certain researchers who have like hundreds of publication. If you have, let's say, 100 publications, again, I would pick out of those 100 publication, perhaps half of them or even a third of them, but those that have been most impactful. So say, for example, I know academics, again, just to give you like a very extreme example, I worked with academics who have hundreds of publication, and amongst these publications that they have like 2 Nature papers, let's put it that way. So the nature papers come first. So those are the most influential, the most impactful, the most prominent, you know, papers. And then you have another 10 or 20 which are still very impactful, and you might have another 30 who are not quite so impactful. So again, I would curate those publications and kind of restrict them to quality, perhaps, rather than quantity. This would be for me for for an academic job. Also, bear in mind that things that are really that people notice are the breadth, the reach of those publications, as well as the impact. So, for example, if you've published again on Nature, obviously that's going to be, very widespread, wide-reaching publication. So, if you have published on the best, you know, publish with, I don't know, on the best outlet in your own country, perhaps say that in your CV. But again, bear in mind that a sort of, people may ask you, why is this impactful in your country? Things like that. So again, this is what I would do. I don't know. I hope it was clear, but again, I'm happy to answer to more if you have a follow-up question.
Another question, how do I explain a gap in my CV?
In most cases, when you submit to for job applications or any applications, there is a section where you can explain a gap. And that gap, for example, again, I don't know if there are many women on the call, could be for some maternity leave or paternity leave, even if you've taken a sort of month of paternity leave. Now it's possible, so you can explain that. There might be other gaps. Again, sometimes you don't have to explain them. Sometimes you may want to explain them. It depends what the gap was. So, again, the most common is maternity or paternity leave, which is absolutely fine, absolutely normal. Everybody goes through those things. It might be that you have had to take a gap because of caring responsibility. So again, perhaps these kind of generic terms can help you in sort of explaining why there is a gap in the CV. Don't obsess about it, because it can happen. Life gets in the way of everything. So again, I don't know. I think that these are the things that I would most commonly say. If you take a gap and perhaps you continue to do sort of any activities, for example, in the volunteering sector, or you can add those activities. For example, in my very personal case, I have I didn't take a gap, but I spent some times in my some couple of years kind of supporting my children in sort of in the Scouts. I did have a role in there, so I just put it as an example of giving back to the community some of the things that the community gave to me previously. So that's another way of actually showing that you are engaged and involved.
Thank you. I think we've got time for a couple more questions, if that's okay. Another one is, how about conferences and workshops? Would they be added to the list of publications or in a different list?
Yes, apologies for that. I didn't include them. I would include again, the conferences and the participation to conferences has become a lot more prominent kind of in recent years, in the sense that even web profiles, web pages, the personal web pages contain sort of conferences. I think that publications are more important, and also key lectures, like keynote lectures or guest lectures. So if you are invited, in other words, to speak at a conference, so those are the things that really stand out as recognition. So I would definitely put, if you have them, obviously, a section called invited papers, and sort of list all the conferences where you have been invited to talk. Those are very important. If you have given keynote lectures as well, internally or externally, that's also very important. If you have, again, in those of you who work in the sciences, sometimes you go to a conference to present a paper, just a normal paper, or even a poster, because they've been accepted as part of the normal process. But some of you, especially those working in the sciences, may have the post-deadline papers accepted. So I would also indicate those. So in an order of priorities, guest lecture, well, keynotes, guest lectures, guest webinars, invited papers, and post-deadline papers. These are all kind of very important things to mention in a CV. And you can have, if you have few of them, you can have a separate section. Sometimes people mention all the conferences you've ever been to, but then again, if some of you have already sort of 10 years of experience, which is absolutely fine. So I don't know if you want to mention all of the conferences you've ever been at. If that's the case, obviously you can have a section on that. I don't know. I find it, yeah, unless they are invited, I find it that they are not quite so important. But obviously, they show your engagement in the field. Other conferences, especially if you are in the teaching sort of in teaching, prominent in teaching, are those that you organize. So again, I on my CV, I did organize sort of many conferences and events kind of during my career, and I do put a section of the conferences that I have organized. Because again, that shows leadership essentially. And again, you can have it under leadership, or you can have a subsection of leadership where you show that you have organized conferences. Again, it's up to you. Remember again that it's, especially if you have a lot of material, people have to navigate your CV. So quality, in my opinion, is better than quantity. I hope that was useful.
Yeah, it was. Thank you very much. Just there is a few more questions. I'm trying to see if there's any similarities so that we can answer questions most effectively. There's one here from an early career researcher. What are the most effective ways to build leadership profile from scratch? Are there specific roles or activities you would recommend starting with?
It depends. It depends what your area is. So if you are, you said early career academic or early career researcher?
Early career researcher.
Oh, researcher. Well, the most important thing for researchers is to show an ability to be impactful in the research that you do. So, and this is both about showing what the outcomes of your research are through publications, so publications, and grant funding. So, whether or not your research is deemed important or crucial or essential enough to be for people to spend public money on it. So that's more or less the gist of it, or even industry money, but public money is the kind of grant, the kind of research grant that comes into academia. Not only, so there are also many industries that sort of want to invest in research done in university. So these are the two main streams of funding that that you can get essentially. So if you are early career researcher, I would try and find ways of developing these aspects. Now, as an early career researcher, you can do that by contributing to your supervisors or to publications of people who are kind of working in your area, but who are already kind of established researchers. And similarly to sort of be included in research grant. Initially, you can only be a collaborator, for example. But that obviously gives you a way into understanding how grant proposals are written, into kind of understanding how you can manage research, for example. You also, if you are written into a grant proposal that perhaps is then successful, you can also get opportunities for professional development as well. So these are more or less the things that I would advise you to look into.
Thank you. There is a lot of questions coming in, so apologies if I've not read yours out. I'm trying to make sure I ask the ones that have been asked a couple of times. Um, One last question, I think, just in the interest of time, I don't want to keep anyone too much longer than scheduled, but there's been a couple of questions about where to look for example CVs, or if it's possible to share a gold standard, I think someone said, CV, and where to look, I guess, for good examples of CVs.
Well, I mean, the first place to look is online, I suppose. So I mean, one of the things that I did a while back when I was again an early career researcher, so whenever I could get my hand on the CVs of someone in my field who would be kind enough to share it with me and publish it, or publish it online on their own sort of profile, I would take a look at that. So again, when you say the gold standard, I don't think that there is as such a gold standard. It's more like how it's more about being able to, again, keep it coherent, keep it relevant, providing the information in a way that is consistent and clear. Because again, people who are in sort of research in search committees, so who do the actual interviews, they see hundreds of applications. So being able to literally skim through a CV and understand more or less everything in, like, say, less than a minute, it's an advantage. So I've done this sort of many times, where I actually look at it and I don't have to actually squint to find the information that I need. So I just go through it, and even if I read it again in a very short, again in a minute, let's put it that way, I can see the coherence, I can see the relevance, I can see the accuracy. And again, if I read the covering letter and I think, oh, but this wasn't mentioned in the CV, and I go back to look for that information, and it's just there under my eyes, and I say, oh yes, I had not noticed that. So that is the kind of mindset that you have to have when you write a CV. Make it easy for yourself. So again, many years ago, I was a fan of perfect formatting with tables and everything. Big mistake, because again, every time you have to update it, you have to perhaps again go back to a complex formatting. So I would say keep it simple and clear and consistent and professional.
Thank you, Erica. I think that's a good note to end on. Before we wrap up, I want to say there's a lot of the questions that I'm getting through are saying thank you to Erica. So on behalf of everyone, I want to say thank you very much to Erica for sharing really helpful advice on CV writing. There was lots of practical tips throughout the presentation that I'm sure people will be able to take away and start applying right away, while it's fresh in everyone's minds. Open up your CVs and see if there's anything that you can take away and change after today. And thank you to everyone who joined as well today, and for all the great questions. There was some, as I say, lots of questions in there. I tried to summarize things as much as possible. Yeah, we'll be sharing the recording with everyone, so hopefully you'll have time to look back and look through the PowerPoint presentation itself and put some notes together. But I think that's everything for today, unless Erica, you have any final remarks.
Now, I would like to wish good luck to everybody. So keep at it, because it's a tough job to look for jobs in academia. So I share and I sympathize. Well, I share your feelings, and I sympathize with everyone. So again, I wish everybody good luck. Jess, if you wanted to perhaps not publish the Padlet, or you could even sort of send everybody the link to the Padlets. I just asked sort of 3 questions, generic questions that can kind of focus your reflections and your kind of post-session thinking about CV writing. You don't have to do them, but if you want to, if they can help you sort of to think a little bit more sort of in depth about writing your CV, obviously you can use them. I've already written them, so you can have them. Anyway, thank you very much for having me, and thank you for this great experience. And again, I wish everybody good luck.
Thank you so much, Erica. Yeah, I've just posted the link to the Padlet into the Q&A. You should all be able to see it. But if anyone again has trouble accessing that, then just send me an email and I can send you the link there. You'll all be able to add and see each other's responses. So it might be a good thing to look at and to look at how other people have answered the questions as well. But yeah, in the interest of not keeping anyone too late, I'll wrap things up for today. But once again, thank you very much to Erica and to everyone for joining today. We'll be sending round the recording and other resources in due course, so you can expect to receive them. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.